And that brings us to the concept of organic farming. If I'm going to farm organically, I have a system, I have a program, and I have these things that we do. That's what we've been working on in our practicals to meet our program to assure the nutrient density. What do we start with? Well, we could start with crop rotation. We typically don't want to grow the same plant in the same place over and over again because each plant takes up different minerals. After that, we have biological management. We're making compost, we're doing compost teas, we're activating worm teas, we're making bioferts. We have animal husbandry. We understand that without animals, we can't really make compost, not in the levels we need to provide. And the mineral, remember, we need plants, and we need lots of plants to get derived into the mineral concentrations that we want in our food. So there's some type of relationship here. Currently in the U.S., pretty much if you want to have a business model for the CSAs, they're all, that big CSA is right next to a dairy farm. Okay, so the dairy farm every day is making, and a vegetarian's okay with that. They have milk and cheese, right? And they maybe say they're not going to eat the dairy farm, that's fine. And then the manure goes into the vegetable cycle, and there you have it, okay? Biofertilizers, we can start to make our own bioferts, so we're going to be doing that Monday's practical. But how we can create those, we utilize manures through vermicomposting is a really popularized one because it densifies, right? And you get a water holding and the effective microorganisms. So you get like a trifecta of that little, that's why the farmers are referring to it as black gold. And also green leaf manures. This is basically the cover crops so that we don't leave our fields exposed. So if we can like rest our bed. So I would grow something that I'm just going to compost. I'm going to cut it in and feed it to the soil. I'm not going to take it out. So these are things that we are more of a resting of our soils. This will be what we're going to look into with the biofert. So how do we basically inoculate and create anaerobic fermentation? So it's a very simple process basically. First we have to create some type of inoculant. One easy way to do that is because we're going to make cheese with you guys, we get a byproduct of whey. And then if we take whey and we add it with molasses, we can create a starter. With that starter, we'll put it in, we'll add manure, okay? So we have manure, okay, 50 kilos of manure into a 200-liter barrel. We fill it with water. We add in our whey inoculant starter. We can add in any other things we may want, but particularly we're going to add in rock dust. When I add in the rock dust, the anaerobic bacteria can eat rocks. Aerobic bacteria cannot. So in the anaerobic formation, they're eating it and they'll convert that rock dust to a water-soluble mineral that then can be, when we add it to our soils, transmitted, right, to the plant. So that's how we remineralize our soils. So there's lots of places on the internet. This place claims, but there are others. We are the only organization connecting the growing industry of commercial rock dust and sea minerals to the grassroots and agricultural sector. What are they selling? They sell glacial rock dust or they'll sell volcanic rock dust. Some people sell what they call sea minerals, which is basically dehydrated seawater. So like if you have a desalination plant, they end up creating all this minerals. Then they bag that up and they sell it to the farmers who then can mineralize it. And people doing seaweed. So if I get seaweed grown, right, and then I dehydrate that, I can put that into my compost and I would get the minerals. So there's really good mineral profiles in seawater or seaweed growing in the water. Volcanic rock dust, but any rock has a mineral profile. But particularly that's what they're selling. You need like a 1 kilo bag for your whole farm. Okay, for like the life of your garden, it's 1 kilo. So maybe you have to spend $10, $20, but it's not really expensive in comparison to what you're buying and how much you can use it for. So this is a nice soil test. So it's a soil and leaf analysis. For this particular, it was a CSA that I just downloaded from their website. And they go through all their soil and leaf tests, and in the next level we'll see that they have recommendations on how to, if you have a deficiency, a good person that's providing these tests will also tell you, hey, you have this deficiency and you should add this much of this per, like say, hectare or acre or whatever unit. So that'll bring us to the concept of what sources for plant nutrients do you know? You need nutrients for your plants. What sources do you know about getting those? So how can I get nutrients for my plants? I don't have any. I started with poor clay. What do I do? Okay. Well, naturally breaking down of any type of organic material. So anything that's organic material contains nutrients. It's what it took to grow the organic material, OM. So we need any of that. Compost, creation of compost from organic material. Utilization of manures. Remember, it's a density and the fermentated activity of the cow is what we're replicating with the compost pile, so that we can further densify, right, and make water soluble the nutrients. So we have to get the nutrients back into the water soluble form so that the new plant can take it up. If not, it just sits there and it'll oxidize. So if I don't compost, then my nutrients oxidize back. The minerals are still there, but like nitrogen, things like this will oxidize. You could use artificial fertilizers, and sometimes at the beginning of a farm, it may be like the only way to get started. So we have to like wean ourselves off of the problem of the soils could be so bad I can't eat. And if I can't eat, I can't work. And if I can't work, I can't pay my bills. So sometimes it's more appropriate to get your bills paid, and then you build up your farm and then go off of that. If you go cold turkey, hey man, I am now organic, and yeah, that's great. So you've got no soil. You've got nothing to build it with. How do you do? So you either go to the supermarket and buy their food, that might be inorganic, because you've created a system that says I can't grow my own food. I put my hands behind my back and I lock them there. But then since I can't work in my garden because I don't allow myself to do those things, I go and I spend at the grocery store, right? These are type of systems. So we might look at those. But if you do good composting, because we know our resources to create our compost, we can change the soil profile 3-6 months. You're going to have really, really good soil. So those are those major nutrients. Nitrogen, potassium, all the way down. And we can get lots of that from nitrogen fixation. Legumes and lightning. Lightning fixes nitrogen into the atmosphere. That's how they get nitrogen into the air. Okay, and then the tree can take it in. So nitrogen fixation can still be present in the soil after a tree was cut down, up to 6 years after. This is the concept we're going to move forward into with the talking about our food forest and why we would use legumes trees as pioneers, and why we would cut them through coppicing or pollarding, which we call chop and drop, because that fixates the nitrogen, so the bacterial colonies are cut off the sugar supply because there's no more photosynthesis, at which time they die into the soil, and they can stay present in the soil for up to 6 years while they're taken back out from another plant, okay? This is our nitrogen in the atmosphere, which is N2, and then how it goes through this cycle, the decomposers for different bacteria, as we described before, the ammonification, nitrification, and denitrifying bacteria. So these are different sets, and this is a cycle. This creates life as we know it on the planet. So if we start to appreciate these, we move to deficiency. So you can find lots of charts, so plant deficiency syndrome charts, okay? In this particular chart, it asks you first question, is it young leaves that you're looking at or older leaves, okay? So assume that I see a deficiency on the young leaf. Is it the terminal bud that you're looking at? Is it the bud that's actually having the problem, or is it the bud is dead? So you're looking at what's happening. So is it at what level? So let's assume that it was the terminal bud remains alive. Okay, so it's got a live bud, but it's having some problem, right? So I'll go down, and if there is a live bud, you look at the leaf, and if the leaf is not wilted, right? If it's not wilted, chlorosis is a problem. But if it is wilted, then you have a copper or a zinc deficiency. If you have chlorosis, then you have a magnesium deficiency, but or there's no spots. So remember how we saw like spots on some of the mulberry leaves? So if I went down to the young leaf, it's having that, okay, terminal bud's alive, young leaf has got spots on it. I come down and I either have an iron or a sulfur deficiency for that particular plant. So that plant being grown in the broad scale with no composting or anything added to it, it's giving me an indication that our soils would have naturalized soils here without any help, would probably have an iron or sulfur deficiency. If I was to add, let's say, a bucket of compost to the base of the mulberry tree, it would increase the production of the tree. It would also, more than likely, you would see the spots go away. And that's how I can figure out what those were. So I'm looking at them. And or if it was old leaves, if the effects are mostly generalized to one place, or are they localized, meaning that they're just one, are they all over, so it's kind of consistent on the whole plant, or is it just this one leaf that has a problem? If it's all over the plant, as we saw, it could be phosphorus and nitrogen, deficiencies. If it was localized, meaning just like one leaf or one branch had a problem but not the whole tree, then that might be magnesium or potassium. So this is how we can look at the leaf. Where is it? A bud, old, come down, and we see our macronutrient deficiencies, and then we can how to look at our soil test, also see we have a deficiency, and then what will we do to alleviate that, composting. So if we look at each of these macronutrients, again, you can find lots of charts. So you just look up macronutrients and where do they come from, and fertilizer sources. So if I have a calcium deficiency, if I have a deficiency, what are the symptoms? So calcium. The new leaves are distorted or irregularly shaped. So if I have, or the blooms they have a problem with the blooming, flowering sequence. That's a calcium deficiency. I could comment, or any desert soils or water generally has plenty of calcium, so deficiencies are rare in calcium. So it's not normal that we have rare calcium deficiencies. So what would I add as a fertilizer source? Well, anything with the word calcium, right, that would be chemicalized, and or gypsum. So if I took sheetrock and I broke the sheetrock to get to the gypsum powder, then I could dilute that in water, add that to my soils, and that would be adding calcium, which is a gypsum. So then you can go down each of these and they'll give you organic sources that you can find for every one of the nutrients that may have a deficiency. Then you would add those into your composting regimes. So it goes through all of those. Micronutrients also. So these are the chemical properties that are exchanging in the cation ion exchange. So really remember, it was tied to clay, not sand. So we need clay particles to facilitate, because they hold a charge. That's how the minerals are stuck to the clay particles. So there's our ion exchange capacity. So what does this mean? Sandy soils, very low, only 10% exchange capacity. Clays are 30% or 3 times more capacity. If we can get things like peat, like there's peat bogs and things like in England, peat is 150 times. And natural zoolites, there's certain types of rocks that you can add in if you're in the right location. You can get 200 times. So here's our soil pH and your alkalinity. Very simple. If you can do the tester, I said that had the 2 probes, and or just litmus paper. So litmus paper is very easy. I make my compost, I dilute it, super simple. So most plants are going to be in that thriving area, anywhere from maximum 5 to 7. So this is a little bit off. Let me slide down, but in the 7 range, which is neutral. So there's again where we want to be. Okay. Where's that come from? Periodic table. So the plants, taking minerals that we find, they create the molecules that build up the amino acids, they build up everything that we see in our plants. So the plant nutrients that we can see, the nutrients from air and water. So air and water give us carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen. The primary nutrients, they can come from soil, lime, or commercial fertilizers. So primary nutrients classified as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Secondary nutrients that are all tied to the primary nutrients, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Okay? And then micronutrients, boron, chloron, copper, iron, magnesium, boron, zinc, and cobalt. One of the students that I had named Tim actually will teach here later, because he has gone through 2 years of training for that. He came with, he's really into nutrition, and he wanted cobalt. How do I get cobalt? Kids can't figure out how to get cobalt in my food. And I was like, well, cobalt's a mineral, it's in rock. So find out the rock that would have cobalt. Then we can take that rock and we can get it into our anaerobic fermentator, and we can get cobalt into the soil. And then if the plant wants cobalt or likes cobalt, a cobalt-loving plant, you can grow that plant, and if you eat it, you will get higher levels of cobalt. And it took a while. Finally, he figured it out. Then he was like, oh man, all I have to do is do these ferments in order to basically ferment to derive mineral profiles that I want for that he ties to nutrition. And so that was a really interesting thing, where you can see somebody that really can't find this literature as such in the nutritional side. But if we go into the soil side, and now a modern nutritionist, let's say, crossing boundaries, where they're learning the soil science and how the soil science relates to the nutritional aspect of eating plants. So again, you can look at lots of different things. So here's key diagnosis of nutrient disorders, upper leaves or lower leaves, okay? And then you just go through. So just look online. You can have these also, but there's lots of this online if you know what to search for. So coffee, having an iron deficiency. Okay, that's yellowing. Then if we have a peach with iron deficiency, the entire leaf is yellow instead of the mid-veining, so we can get into looking at specific leaves. Magnesium deficiencies in grapes. So a magnesium deficiencies, zinc deficiencies. So based on the chart, looking at micronutrient deficiencies versus macronutrient deficiencies. So it's two separate charts, right? And then I can go and identify what is happening. So one other thing, we made our biochar, but biochar is like super a big part of soils to water retention. It also does. It also will do the cation ion exchange. So what is it? It's charcoal made through pyrolysis. It's used for a soil improver. Soil carbon storage for hundreds to thousands of years. It will not disagree. Some scientists even saying up to 1 million years to be stable. Biochar oven design is critical. So the concept that people want to make high temperature biochars, getting the internal temperatures up to like 600 to 800 degrees. And the fuel sources, what are you making it? So any crop residues, so from a farming standpoint, whatever we have as a waste product, any organic waste can be made into char. Even your compost from your kitchen can be charred. It will just evaporate out the water and then char it. Or otherwise would not be productively utilized. So it may be more productive for me to take my food scraps and utilize it like in a worm farm or in some type of weed tea than it would be to char it. So typically we're going to char low nutrient value crops. So like stubble, anything like that. So get your soil samples and soil tests. So we want to have to do that, and that's probably one of the first steps to a good plan. The property, what's my soil test? Then I know where to start.